Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Shay Ali here with you on Inspired Online. And this afternoon, we have got the lovely Elle Misra with us. Now, some of you will probably not know who Elle is. Bit of a different guest today. I thought, let's go to my professional life and get someone really inspiring from the world of law, which I talk about, but I haven't had a legal guest for quite a while. So Elle is quite special to me. I met her very early on in my career when I was still studying, qualifying, doing that thing we call pupillage, which basically means I'm a baby barrister and still learning the ropes with someone else. And we were both at somewhere rather eminent to do that. And Elle was just this wonderful, friendly face that I'd see around and, you know, made everything just one step further in that journey, made everything okay and everything a lot more comfortable. So I really wanted to reach out to her and see, you know, what she could share as her wisdom today. And she's done some amazing things with her life. She still has an incredible career as a barrister. She is a mum of two beautiful children and a very passionate feminist as well. So I can't wait to get started with this. Welcome, Elle. Thank you for joining me today.
Thank you very much for asking me, Shay, and thank you for your very kind words about our time in chambers together. It's always a pleasure to be remembered as someone kind. I think that's really important to me.
Absolutely. So if you had to share your wisdom with the world in a nutshell, what would you say?
I would say that everything starts and begins with you. So no matter what you're trying to do, whether it's trying to climb that sometimes slippery ladder in your career, whether it's trying to juggle, in my case, being a working mum, dealing with children and everything else, whether it's trying to find fulfillment in other stuff, I think it's really important to come back to yourself and to ground yourself in you in a strange way.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk a little bit about your journey then, because in many ways, for people out there, you have the dream life. You've got, you know, the wonderful relationship, the children, the dream career and all that. And I know it's not always as glossy as you know, people see from the outside, but how did you use that lesson of starting with you to build what you have?
Well, I guess you're absolutely right. I think to some people, it will look like I've had a very easy ride, and I will accept that I had, in terms of career, I have had a very, very good, privileged journey in a sense, of going straight from a very good university to pupillage to tenancy to a career at a top set in London, and I've been very, very fortunate in that regard. And I definitely regard myself as fortunate in my home life as well, touch wood. But like every barrister you've ever met, Shay, there are definitely times when I've got to pull myself up by the bootstraps, and I do have moments of self-doubt, moments when I'm looking at my peers and thinking, am I progressing as much as I need to be? Am I where I should be? And I'm someone who's very both professionally and personally very analytical, and also very self-critical. I'm probably my own worst enemy. So I think during those points when I've had to pull myself up by the bootstraps, so there have been times in my career when I thought, I don't know, is there an issue here? I mean, we've seen a lot of this in the press recently. Is there an issue here for me and certain of my colleagues because I'm a woman, because I'm a non-white barrister? Is it a combination of those two characteristics? Is it something to do with, something else? Is that why I'm seeing other people progressing in a certain way that you might think, oh gosh, they've really overtaken me, or they seem to be getting these great cases. What am I doing wrong? So moments of self-doubt like that. And as a barrister, you often get, a lot of people will tell you, and you probably know yourself, that you get very steep curves followed by certain sort of periods of plateauing. And you think, I'm not really growing as a person. I'm billing, I'm doing these cases, but am I really growing as a professional? So I've had quite a few of those peaks and troughs professionally. And then for me, the biggest wobble came when I had to recalibrate, because I had my first child. Took maternity leave and came back, and I was very fortunate in that I took 6 months leave, my husband took 6 months leave, we did shared leave each time. And obviously, as someone who specializes in employment inequalities, I'm kind of, my colleagues are kind of all over the
you should hope so.
rules, as it were, the rules, the laws, the rights and wrongs of it all. But even so, I hadn't anticipated just how much I would doubt myself coming back, and worrying that I might lose focus, that I couldn't actually juggle it all, because I suddenly had this little tiny person in my life who was the center of my universe, and a very demanding job to juggle, which involves erratic hours, late instructions, late briefs, high pressure. And ultimately, the buck stops with you, because when the solicitor instructs you to advise, to represent, it sits on your insurance. You're the one who's got to make those judgment calls over cases involving, whether it's millions of pounds or someone's livelihood. Feels like a lot of pressure. And so I tried a couple of things. I normally, it's maybe a bit sad, but since I was a teenager, I've always had kind of a rolling 5-year life plan.
Oh, lovely.
And before I actually gave birth, while I was pregnant, I thought, well, I better tweak my 5-year life plan here. I think a really good thing to remind myself would be to do mentoring, or finding a mentor when I come back. And that was a really good thing to do. And I had a few other suggestions, sort of on paper, seemed really good. But when I came back and did things like found it was a mentoring scheme for things called City Mothers, which I would actually recommend. They kind of helped, but they didn't kind of resolve the issue. And so that's the point at which I had to, there are always those points when you've just got to go back into yourself to figure it out for yourself. And you can have as much guidance and support as you're lucky to have, you're grateful to have. But ultimately, you've got to have a realization yourself as to what matters and how you're going to do it. And I guess there came a point where I just thought, I can only do what I can do. And actually, I am really good at my job. I'm actually really good at this. And I'm also a really good mom. And I'm not going to get either of these things perfect all the time. And it's going to be a seesaw, but I'm going to have to accept that there are times when my work is flat out and I don't get to be the perfect mum's net mum, whatever else. And there are other times when I've got baby sick all over me and I am actually going to be struggling to keep my eyes open to get through a set of papers and, prop myself up on coffee. And I think once I just gave myself that kind of, it doesn't matter what other people think, you are good enough and you've got this pep talk to myself, I started feeling a lot better about it. And I kind of think that's what was my parents have always told me, is that you've got to be able to rely on yourself. And whether that's financially, whether that's emotionally, spiritually, whatever it is, at the end of the day, as my dad would often tell me, you come to this earth and you leave this earth alone. And if you're lucky, you'll have a number of people in your life that you'll be able to count on from start to finish. They'll always be there for you. And I'm very lucky to have that. But ultimately, not everyone is lucky enough to have that. And there will be moments where no matter how much people love you and care for you or want to support you, they don't quite understand what's going on in your head or in your mind. So that's the coming back to yourself, centering yourself, I guess, empowering yourself by loving yourself, trusting yourself, and being confident in your decisions, going with your gut. So I suppose really that's I've had to remind myself of that a number of times over my career.
And I love that, because it's the concept of, I love that concept of, we all have voices in our head, but which one are we going to listen to? Are we going to listen to the critic, or are we going to listen to the one that celebrates us? And it sounds like when you've had those moments, it's the one that celebrates you, the one who is like, you know what, let's be kind to yourself. You're doing great. And given all that you've got going on, there are moments where you need this and there's moments that you need that. So I think that's absolutely wonderful. And I want to dig a little more into, we both do discrimination work, and, working with women in the city who, are perhaps facing that glass ceiling. And I was wondering if you could share some words about how, you've created this amazingly successful career and, managed to balance that with also the having children piece. How did you do that?
Well, first of all, thank you very much. That's a very generous and lovely description of it. But as you know, a lot of the time it's like, gliding on the surface and furiously paddling under the surface, which is 99% of it. Smoke and mirrors as well, and jazz hands, because I'm always into drama. Okay, jazz hands always. So I think, I guess, as a barrister in particular, So important to look after yourself, to build up that resilience to get through those moments. So I guess I've split this into two parts. In terms of just the difficulties of doing a really demanding job at a high level, as is required of you, whilst having a life and a family and anything else you might want to have alongside a career, self-care is absolutely vital. And I have always been someone who, when a case settles, I am immediately worried about the next case, the next thing. I never give myself any downtime at all, or used to not give myself any downtime at all. Just bounce from one thing to the next. And in recent years, I've learned that actually, if something settles and you might not be able to just kick up your heels for the whole of that time, but it's absolutely fine to say, okay, do you know what? I've got a gift of this 3-hour block here, and I'm not going to worry about the next set of papers right now. I'm going to cook a really nutritious meal. I'm going to just read something I really want to read. One thing I've done a few times is just snuck off to the cinema entirely by myself. And I sit in one of, well, seems like a long time ago now with the pandemic, but just gone to see a play or something, just entirely by myself, and it feels like skiving, but I'm like, I'm self-employed and I need to be a good boss to myself today. I'm going to give myself a little bit of downtime just to recharge. And so whether it's that or just things like just saying it's absolutely fine. So in my case, saying I actually don't think I can do this job without a brilliant nanny, which is what I have, an amazing nanny who helps me and my husband. And my husband and I have always been very into equality of equality, bringing different but complementary and equal things to parenting, which is why we did shared leave both times.
Amazing.
And just being okay to lean on other people sometimes. So that's the kind of part one, just whatever it takes to find your little happy, chilled out, cool recharge spot, because you need those to keep going and to be able to keep going and have the resilience. I guess the second part of it is sometimes when the career questions, the career dilemmas and worries get too much, I always like to step back and go, just park that, focus on the next step. The kind of, I suppose it's a bit like Dory in the film. You can tell I'm a mum, can't you?
Finding Nemo. Don't worry, I love my Disney and Pixar.
I know. Yeah. Thank goodness for Disney Plus, I think a lot of parents are saying at the moment. So basically it's a kind of just park the sort of bigger strategic questions if they're becoming a bit overwhelming, and just focus on the next set of papers or the next hearing you've got. Just literally go right into that piece of work and just do that piece of work to the best of your ability. Do a brilliant job of that piece of work, and then the next piece of work, do a brilliant job, and just keep doing a brilliant job if you can. Work hard and give it your all, and bit by bit, hopefully people notice that you are someone who cares to do a brilliant job each time.
Yeah.
And then once in a while, you've got to reach back out to the sort of strategic shelf, as it were, and say, okay, I had those things I parked on my little life strategy shelf or my 5-year life plan. Now I'm feeling good about myself. I'm feeling in a good space. Let me have a little think about that and work out what I'm going to do. And so I, for example, set up a professional discipline group from scratch at my previous chambers. And that was following a moment of self-doubt, following a period of just keep doing the work and hopefully people notice, and then going back to my strategy shelf of what do I do now? So I suppose that's kind of how I've always approached it. And I must say my strategy shelf is getting a little bit dusty at the moment during the pandemic, but I think it's all about just getting through this extraordinary period at the moment.
Well, and I think, it's so important for us to be kind to ourselves right now as well, because, our careers maybe haven't gone in the way that we might expect or might have expected in 2019. But, I also think there's been many gifts, as we were saying before we came online. It's also given, us the gift of maybe taking some time out or actually working virtually.
Absolutely. I mean, yesterday evening, I was really happy to reconnect with something I haven't done in ages. So I did a script writing course for a couple of hours last night. And it was actually lovely because I'm really passionate about drama, performing arts, and before having children, I was just about able to wrestle with that as my main hobby alongside being a barrister. But once you added 1 and then 2 children to the mix, it's felt like my hobbies have really fallen off the radar. So actually, the fact that I'm not commuting, so having to have that commute or sort of traveling around for court cases at the moment, has allowed me to carve out a little more time, and I hope to get back to a bit of that for me at some point.
Yeah, well, I found the same actually. I've been doing an accents class, which I'm not going to demonstrate right now, but that's been fabulous, and fitness and all that kind of thing. So it's been wonderful in that sense. But I wanted to go back to what you were saying about shared parenting. I did a talk for some parents to be recently who were going to make like these decisions on how are we going to do this. So do you have any tips for someone who perhaps wants to take on that equal parenting a lot more, particularly in this environment where maybe both parents now do work from home?
Absolutely. Well, when they introduced shared parental leave, and before that, so to be fair, when I had my first child, shared parental leave hadn't yet come in. Right. And so my husband was one of the, I think, maybe less than 1% of men who took additional paternity leave.
Wow.
And he was very lucky because his employer was very enlightened in that regard and facilitated that for us. And we both...
6 months is a lot, right? Because usually paternity is like 2 weeks.
Exactly. Yeah. And we also had the... so that was great that they had, quite switched on in that regard and progressive. But equally, I'm very aware that my husband and I have broadly equal... we're equal earning capacity and income. Right. So we've always since we met at university, we've always been broadly at the same level, as it were. And so we were lucky enough, I appreciate that, lucky enough to have the financial ability to do that as well. Second time around, shared parental leave had come in, and my husband was very fortunate. He got 6 months paid leave from the same employer, because that's what they'd implemented by that time. Wow. And that was very nice, actually, because we discovered that after I was a few months pregnant. They said, oh, by the way, we've decided to introduce this policy, at which point my husband was like, oh, well, funny you say that. It's quite handy, actually. Yeah. But we'd, in fact, I think very early on, I'd been very clear that I do see parenting as a, in a situation, of course, where there are two parents on the scene, and that's not to diminish from my very many friends who are extremely successful single parents, but in a situation where you're parenting with a partner, I've always been very clear that you might do different things. You might have different things you want to major on, different skills, indeed biological differences, which we need to recognize as well. Because, as a woman, you're going to do a different thing in whether it's giving birth or breastfeeding or whatever else, but an equal thing. And so just working out what equality is for you early on is really helpful. So I think the first thing is just making sure you understand your rights. So if you're employed, just working out what the policies are, what the financial situation is going to be, and then working out what that how you want to make that dynamic pan out for you, what your concept as a pair of parents of equality is. But have those conversations really early, like have those conversations before you decide to have a family, if you can. Or as soon as you know you're going to become a parent, start having those conversations early on and just kind of talk out lots of scenarios. My husband and I we're both like this. He always, when we communicate non-verbally, so in a written form, I always send him things in Word, and he always sends me things in an Excel spreadsheet, which is unsurprising given his job and mine.
Well, he's an actuary.
We'd both be going so if I do these number of hours, and you do those, and we do that, and but we thrashed out so much. And then of course, what you have a kid, and 90% of what you thought was going to happen goes out of the window because it's all chaos for the first few weeks. But having a good plan in place definitely helps. And also in my case, it meant I could manage my return to work more efficiently. I could speak to my clerks and say, okay, here are my big cases. Actually, the timing is such that I should be able to pick this one back up when I get back. Here's who's going to look after that or babysit my case for me while I'm away. Or here's, how I expect to come back as well, flexibly to begin with. And those sorts of conversations I could have early on.
Yeah. Oh, that's brilliant. I would hope people put that kind of thought into it, and a lot of people I know do, but sometimes you're just blessed with the unexpected, and there we go.
Absolutely. And no, nothing is ever one size fits all in this life. So I think that's fair enough, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And then how did you, you've given us a clue about this, but how did you get back into having your career flying again after giving birth and, obviously needing to take some time at home. Just a few words about balance.
So one of the things I decided to do very early on, and to be honest, it felt like a slightly courageous step at the time, because I didn't see that many people around me doing the same thing, but now I do, which is brilliant.
Yeah.
So the first thing I wanted to do was actually be quite open and transparent with loyal instructing solicitors and my clerks and people I work with, and not to try and come back to work as though I'd never been off and just had a baby. So, I was in quite regular communication with solicitors who know me very well, and the ones who sent me most of my work. So they, I'm very fortunate. They all knew I was having a baby. And in one case, I had to hand over a much cherished Court of Appeal brief to a colleague. But, so everyone knew about it and sort of knew about those sorts of things early on. And I also made it clear to my clerking team that they were never going to need to, obviously, whilst respecting my personal life and not sort of giving out information that they don't need to give out, it was unlikely that I would ever be saying, well, don't tell anyone I've got a small baby at home, or don't tell anyone I've been on mat leave. Because I had met a number of female barristers who really felt they had to either almost semi-conceal their pregnancy or maternity leave, or really downplay the fact that, because they were so worried that they would lose out on work, or that they would be stereotypically seen as having taken their eye off the ball, or being unable to focus on work in the same way, that they would automatically have a different priority. And in the same way that when you have a second child and you worry about, oh, I loved the first one so much, what's going to happen? And wise parents who've gone before you go, oh, you don't understand. But when that second child arrives, you'll be able to cope. Your love will be infinite and it'll be absolutely fine. And it was a bit like that with career and children. I just thought, oh gosh, this career I absolutely love, this child I absolutely love, what's going to happen? And it's just, you do somehow morph to fit the two things.
Fabulous.
But I can understand that, as a profession, we're still developing, and we have a massive problem with retention of women. So we have broadly equal numbers coming into the profession, but by about 10, 15 years core, we see a massive drop off. And, there's a lot of good work being done at the Bar Council and other groups on this. And a lot of that is to do with either the perception of not being able to cope with having a home life child, a child to look after, and a career, or the reality. So I'm not going to pretend, because I had a pretty good time of it all, in objectively speaking.
Yeah.
I'm not going to pretend that my experience is what every female barrister have had. And I definitely got friends who've had a really rough time going back. But I think being open really helps. And the number of times I would have solicitors say to me, oh, I'm so glad you said that, because actually, do you know that I've got a 1-year-old at home, and actually it would be really help me if we just changed the timing of this slightly, or we did something in a different way. The number of people who just felt they could then be really open with me, professional, but open, within an appropriate boundary. And it's just meant that, so with my clerks, I would say, actually, I want to work flexibly. And to be honest with you, because I'm a barrister and I'm self-employed, that's a given anyway. I do work flexibly. But here are some days when I think, unless something really urgent comes up, or it's really important to my client or the case, I'm actually going to be with my child. So in each case, with both of my children, I think I would define myself as having worked flexibly for about 2 years each time. Still doing a very heavy caseload, but just doing it in a way that worked a bit more and meant that I could have some sort of sacrosanct time that was just for me and family. And that just made me feel like I was being a better mum, which was important to me as well.
Absolutely. And I have to say, I've had some clients that love it as well, or obviously when you're in court, that's fixed hours. But, when you can say to someone, do you know what, let's have this consultation on Zoom, which is something we have to do now anyway. Or we can have it at, 3 o'clock in the afternoon during your child's nap time rather than 10 a.m. I mean, God, the amount of love I've got from just offering those kind of things as an option has been like, oh, thank God.
Definitely. And, it's all, most of this stuff is swings and roundabouts. So for every person who, for every instructing solicitor or client you have who might not themselves be dealing with, a childcare issue, there might be a knock-on effect because there's someone else they're dealing with, or indeed in the future when they have to deal with one, they think, oh yeah, I remember that time we got around the problem this way. And it's great because I'm actually seeing a real change in culture. I don't know, again, it's because I specialize in employment and equalities, whether I have a bit of a an echo chamber or going on, or a bit of a gilded existence in that regard. But I'm seeing a massive cultural shift at the moment at the bar. Just the conversations that are being had at a really high level, and just, the fact that, I'll go to court, I'll go to a tribunal. Sometimes a judge will just proactively say to me and to my male opponent, "Oh, I noticed that you're both travelling from a considerable distance to make this case. Would it assist? Are there any either childcare or other caring commitments that either of you have? You don't need to tell me, but do you both want to go and have a chat and see if there's a way that we can make this long hearing work a bit better for both of you?" And these sorts of comments are coming from the judges without any prompting at all from me or an opponent, which is lovely to see. Yeah. And, 9 times out of 10, it's like, no, actually, thank you very much for asking, but we're fine. We can do this. And that 1 out of 10 times, my opponent or I will say, actually, it'd be wonderful if we'd have a slightly later start on a Monday, which means I can have the weekend with my family and travel early up on a Monday morning.
Yeah.
Little things like that.
Yeah.
And I'm definitely, and that's sort of good news. And I've been mentoring a few barristers, including some barristers who are now also doing that juggle of home and childcare commitments and a life back at the bar. And it's really nice that I've got sort of more positive stories to tell them, I think.
Good. I love it. That's really good to hear. And I just want to just take it a bit more general outside sort of the world of barrister. Do you think that discrimination in the city is improving at the moment?
No, I'm not sure I could say that. My real concern is as to what happens post-pandemic, dare I say. I'm very concerned that women are going to come off quite badly, and that some discriminatory practices are going to be entrenched, or that women are going to be quite badly affected. We can already see that just from the sort of initial statistics on who's being furloughed, who's being made redundant, we're seeing a definite skew in one direction. And I wouldn't want to say too much more without properly analysing that, but my fear is that we're going to see a regression in terms of women in the workplace, and that's not confined to the law at all. That's across all professions, all vocations, all jobs. And I really hope that we're just vigilant of that. Yeah. And we don't allow it to happen. And we remember the direction of travel before all of this horrible pandemic descended upon us all.
Indeed. And do you have any words of comfort to, people who may find themselves in that position right now, or maybe coming to it shortly?
Absolutely. There are so many people across the country going through what you will be going through right now. And it's really important. Don't be afraid to reach out for help, to speak to a friend, to speak to a legal advisor if you need to speak to your union. Unions are really important. Yeah. There are charities out there, Maternity Action. You've probably heard of Pregnant Then Screwed. You've got a lot of barristers and a lot of pro bono work, Citizens Advice Bureaus. So things aren't the same. Things are really difficult, and I'm not going to pretend that it's going to be an easy ride for everyone, but there is help out there. And there are a lot of people who are determined not to let things go in the wrong direction.
Fantastic. Well, it's been so lovely to spend this time with you, Elle, and thank you. It's been a very rich conversation. I was wondering if you have any final thoughts that you'd like to share with our audience today.
Just that I hope you stay safe and well. I think that's really, because whatever any of your speakers say about anything, whatever sort of perceived words of wisdom we might have, I guess we come back to the fact that without your health, you're nothing. So please take good care of yourselves and those you love, and be there for others. And when we get through this horrible phase of history, we can all rebuild together and have another chance at sort of rebuilding things in a better way, I think.
Fabulous. And that's a lovely thought. And I think that concept of collaboration and just helping each other where we can is very beautiful as well. So if any of our lovely audience would like to get in touch with you, where can they find you?
If you need me professionally, then you can find me at Old Square Chambers. So website is oldsquarechambers.co.uk, and my handle on Twitter, if you want to find me there, where I'm often, I suppose, saying things that are vaguely relevant to what I've said today. My handle is at Eleena Misra, ELEENA MISRA. It's been really lovely to speak to you, Shay, and obviously lovely to have stayed in touch with you. Please do keep on with this series. It's lovely. And I'm going to go and look up some of the other videos now.
It's been lovely to have you, and take care of you and your beautiful family, and hope to speak soon.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. You take care too.
Bye.
Bye.